Hello and welcome to my studio for the 16th episode of the Green Bean podcast. My name is Katie Greene and this is Jack, and we're both really glad that you're here, whether you've been here many times before or this is your first visit. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy hearing what creative projects I've been up to. In this episode I have got a bit of drawing news and a small drawing project to share with you. I've got a small update on my knitting, although it's been really hot here in the UK. It's August, it's the middle of summer, and I've not been doing very much knitting. I have been doing a lot of sewing, so I've got a new sewing project to share with you. I have a book review and a little bit of chat about some events and adventures I've got coming up. So settle in with a cup of tea or a cool drink, and I hope you enjoy what we've got in store for you today, starting with a walk out on the moors. In terms of drawing lately, apart from client work, I've been entirely focused on getting myself ready for Yarndale. Yarndale is a wool knitting crochet yarn trade show in Yorkshire at the end of September, and it will be my first big show where I will have had a stand all to myself. So I'm nervous and excited and thinking about what I can fill that stand with for a whole weekend. It's a real kind of change and step up for me from Edinburgh Yarn Festival, where I just had a pop-up stand for a couple of hours, to having a full stand that's going to be there open for the entire weekend. So I've been really thinking carefully about adding new products to my range and what people might like, and it's been really fun and keeping me really busy. So I'm obviously going to have the products that I've had so far, tea towels and the wooden sheep brooches, prints and posters and greetings cards, but I'm going to be adding more cards to my range. I'm adding a new tea towel design, and I've got a couple of other secrets up my sleeve as well that I'm not going to tell you about today, but today I am going to tell you about one of the new things that I'm working on, which is a range of rubber stamps. And this is possibly the thing I'm most excited about bringing because, well, two reasons. Because rubber stamps are something that I had in my range before. When I was first self-employed and starting my Etsy shop, I had a few designs available, and it's something that I've really wanted to do right from the beginning of bringing my business back to life again, is having a range of rubber stamps, particularly with sewers, knitters and crocheters in mind. I really wanted to have some stamps available that were specially designed for crafters to use. So I'm really, really excited that I'm doing this. And I've been working on the designs in my sketchbook and in my head for months and months, and I finally arrived at a small collection that I think I'm happy with, and that's what we're going to go ahead with. So that's what I have on my drawing table today. I've got the final pencil sketches and I just need to ink those in, so you get to watch me having a go on those for a while. So I have a page of designs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 designs. I'm not sure I'm going to use them all. Basically what I'm going to do is give myself a kind of catalogue of designs to choose from, and then I can pick my favourites. Something I've learned from years and years of designing rubber stamps is that keeping them really simple is best, even though that's really tricky for me. I think no one will be surprised to hear that, because you know how much I enjoy intricate work and lots of detail, so keeping them simple is definitely a challenge. But if I give myself lots of options to choose from, then I think it'll be fun choosing the best ones. My idea for these stamps is that they can be used in a couple of different ways, either on gift tags for handmade items, or I imagine them being stamped in fabric ink on ribbon or cotton tape to make something that can be sewn into a garment. I really love the idea of having something personalised that you sew into something that you've made, just to let people know that it's handmade. As I mentioned before, it's been proper hot and sticky here this summer, and I have just not been interested in doing very much knitting. That's not to say that I haven't been inspired to knit. I've certainly, my list of things that I want to cast on, as always, grows ever longer. But I've just not felt like sitting down and knitting, and I think a large part of that is to do with not wanting to have the warmth of wool in my hands at this time of year. But when I have been knitting, this project is the one that I've been picking up the most. And this is the Ginkgophyte top from the spring issue of Pom Pom Quarterly this year, designed by Emily Greene. Just going to check my chart. Now, I knew as soon as this issue of Pom Pom came out that this was the project I want to make. I love the design. I love all of Emily's designs, in fact. I think she's an extremely talented designer. But this is the first one of her designs that I've made. And I'm sort of, when I'm feeling like knitting, I'm really making myself get on with this because it's a summer top, so I really would like to have it to wear before this season is over. And the piece I'm working on now is the front. I've already finished the back. So, you know, for a top with short sleeves, we're not making terrible progress. It might yet have a chance of being finished before the end of the summer, especially because I've got some travelling coming up, and I always find that travelling helps me focus and get some knitting time in. So the yarn that I'm using for this project is a blend from Arbon Textiles that I bought at their open day back in June. It doesn't sound that long ago actually. I feel like I've had this on the needles forever, but June, it's not that long ago. I haven't been trudging along with this project forever like it feels like I have. And it's from their Cocktails range, which is a range that they normally produce as tops, spinning fibre. And they did a special edition run sometime last year, I think it was, for mill members and for selling at shows, which was a yarn based on that blend. The fibre is merino and silk and a bit of grey alpaca. And the grey alpaca gives a lovely kind of heathered base to the yarn so that, the colour doesn't look like one flat colour. It's got lots of depth and tone to it, and as well the silk is a really, really bright white, and occasionally there's some neps of that in the yarn, which is really beautiful, and obviously it gives the yarn a bit of a shine as well. I surprised myself by not picking the green. That will probably surprise you as well. But I was really drawn to this shade called Strawberry Daiquiri, which is a sort of pink, orange, rust, warm. It's a beautiful colour, and it'll go really nicely with green. So I guess that's the important thing. It'll still match most of my wardrobe really well. So I picked up 4 skeins, which in the end I think is probably going to be too much. I think I'm only going to use 3 for this project, and I'm making the second size. Luckily, I got gauge on my first swatch, which almost never happens. And the way that I usually deal with that, rather than knitting umpteen swatches to try and get the right gauge, if I'm happy with the fabric of my swatch, then I will usually make adjustments to the pattern so that I can work with the gauge that I have to create a garment that will fit. But in this case, I had the very unusual experience of getting the right gauge on my first try, so I can just relax and follow the pattern as written, which is something very rare for me.
and I'm really enjoying it. It's really well written, as is the case with all pom-pom patterns. I'm finding it really nice to follow, and yeah, when I'm enjoying knitting, I'm really enjoying it. I've been doing lots of sewing lately, and I think it's partly due to the warm weather and partly because my partner took some time away, so I had a little bit of extra space to spread stuff out in the kitchen, which is my main sewing space. We have a large table in the kitchen, which is usually where we pack orders for my shop, but he took a break away and I just spread out all of my sewing stuff and made a massive mess in the kitchen for 4 days. So it was very productive. I made first a beetle blouse, which you might have seen on Instagram, and I talked about the process with my supporters on Patreon. But simultaneously I was also working on a dinosaur jumpsuit, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So the pattern I used is from Ikatee Couture, which is a French pattern company that specialises actually in children's sewing patterns, which is why this one is called Mum, because it's the adult section of their website. And something that I love is that they offer adult versions of their patterns that they have for children. I don't know about you, but I am always looking at children's clothes wishing that I could have them for myself. So yeah, this pattern company makes those dreams come true for me. I found out about Ikatee through Isabel of the Fluffy Fibres podcast. Hers is really one of my favourite podcasts. She has such a gentle, lovely voice, and she has such inspiring sewing as well as knitting projects. So if you don't know Isabel, then I really recommend you checking her podcast out. She was where I heard about Ikatee Couture, and when browsing their website I fell in love with this jumpsuit pattern. The other reason I chose it is because it is exactly like a outfit that I'd seen on Pinterest that I really liked. The outfit happened to be worn by a toddler, but I very much was clear that this is exactly what I wanted to make with a particular dinosaur fabric that I had. So all of these things started coming together. So let me show you the dinosaur fabric. This is the back of the bodice here. So the dinosaur fabric came from a Danish website called Stoff Stil, which I highly recommend unless you're trying to not add to your fabric stash, in which case don't go there. It's very dangerous. But this is like a blue denim chambray. It's 100% cotton, and it's printed with tiny white triceratops. So it's perfect. It's like a little bit grown up, like you'd have to be really close to it to figure out that they're dinosaurs. But it's very cool. I'm really happy with it. So you can see the bodice is pretty much finished here. I've done everything. I've finished the inside of the sleeves with these lovely ruffles. I finished the button plackets. This is the first button plackets I've ever made, so I'm really proud of those. Especially my top stitching. I was really nervous doing that. But yeah, what I've decided to do is I've done all the buttonholes and I'm going to add the buttons now, because one of the patterns I have when I'm sewing, I don't mean a sewing pattern, I mean like a behaviour pattern, is that I will finish everything apart from the last detail, and then I'll just leave it for 3 or 4 weeks or months or however long, whether that's sewing up the hem or sewing on the buttons, making the buttonholes. Yeah, I will just avoid that final task. So I thought if I do that before finishing the rest of the outfit, then at least, you know, I can't avoid that any longer. So this bodice is going to be complete. You can see that it still has its raw edge at the bottom. I haven't actually started making the trousers yet. So that's my next project, is to assemble the bottom half of this jumpsuit, and then once I add the waistband, which is going to be elasticated, the whole thing will be finished. So there isn't that much work left to go, but I wanted to show you the bodice so far because I'm really pleased with it. I do have a couple of, I made some serious modifications to the pattern in terms of fit. The first one was that I shortened the bodice. It was very long in the body, I think because it's intended not to hit at the natural waist, but to hit a bit lower. So I took 2 inches off the bodice, and correspondingly I added 2 inches to the rise of the crotch in the trousers. But that actually wasn't enough. I still found the crotch rise was too low for me, so I added another inch in there as well, just to make sure that everything was comfortable when I sat down in them. And the other thing is that I was very much between sizes for this pattern. So the top I made in the second size, and the trousers I initially made my muslin in the 4th size out of 7, so the middle size, and they were too small. And I know there's been a lot of conversations about size inclusivity lately, and I think this pattern unfortunately is, as it is published at the moment, not great for that. I mean, I'm aware that I am not a large person. Realistically, I'm not even really a medium person. So to find myself in the middle of the size range and the fit being too small means the pattern's size range is just not wide enough. What I was able to do is, adjust my muslin and redraft based on my own shape and measurements, but I know that not everybody feels comfortable or confident doing that. So at that point I stopped referencing the pattern and I drafted based on my own shape and made some adjustments. So I've ended up with something that's very much in between sizes, quite a small bodice and a very different size for the bottom half. So yeah, the pattern that I followed doesn't really look anything like the pattern. It's going to fit on my natural waist, and yeah, I'm pleased with how the muslin looks, so hopefully the main body's going to turn out alright. Of course it has pockets, and I'm undecided whether the cuffs at the ankle on my Pinterest inspiration are elasticated, which I think is very cute, but I also, when I tried the muslin on, I really liked how it looked with them turned up, so I might do that instead. We shall see when I try it on. The other detail I wanted to mention was just this tiny lace letter K, which I'm sticking at the back neck. I picked this up in my favourite fabric shop, the Cloth House in London. I think maybe the first time I went in there, they just have them displayed by the counter, and I had nothing in mind for it. I just thought it was extremely cute, and it's been sitting in my sewing box for years. And when I was fiddling around the other day looking for the right thread and the right buttons to stitch on here, I just saw it and I thought, oh, that would look cute in the back of the jumpsuit. So nobody's going to see it, only I'm going to know that it's there. Oh well, you're going to know that it's there as well, but it's not going to be on display. I just think it's a really cute addition, and that's one of the things I love about Make My Own Clothes, is being able to add those special details that you wouldn't get in something that you bought in a shop. I have chosen a book to chat with you about this time, but before we get into that, I want to talk about an adventure that I've been on recently, and in a bit I'll talk about an adventure I'm going on soon as well, and they're both related, sort of, to my book, Lighter Than My Shadow. So after Lighter Than My Shadow came out, I think I've mentioned before, I wasn't particularly well for a while, and I found it extremely difficult and upsetting when I was going to events and talking about the book, and people would ask me what I was working on next, and I felt under a huge amount of pressure to be starting work on a new book, and I was frankly exhausted and, as I said, not particularly well. It had been such an effort 5 years to spend writing and drawing that book. I just wasn't ready to think about the next thing. I think I'm sort of almost maybe ready now, but that's 6 years after finishing Lighter Than My Shadow, more than 6 years. So it's definitely required a kind of recovery period. And during that time, I haven't really been involved in the world of comics and graphic novels. In fact, for 4 years after finishing my book, I couldn't even bear to read a comic at all. I hadn't read any comics for a really long time. So it was a big deal for me when I picked up my first comic again, after getting over writing mine, I guess. And the reason I'm chatting about this is because I recently went to the Graphic Medicine conference in Brighton. Graphic Medicine is an organisation that brings together artists, scholars, medical professionals, people from all kinds of different backgrounds all over the world who have an interest in comics and graphic novels, so visual narrative in terms of making visual narrative about illness, or using visual narrative to inform or educate or challenge the narratives and stereotypes and ideas around illness. Understandably, my book fits under this umbrella, and I have spoken at previous graphic medicine conferences, but this time I just went along for fun. I went to catch up with old friends and to hear talks, and it was such an inspiring few days. It was really good for me, I think, to put myself back in that community, and a few people did ask me what I was working on next, and I was able to tell them without feeling pressured or upset that I'm not quite ready to work on a new book yet. But I do hope to do one. So it's really, it feels special to me to have got to the stage where I can think about doing one again, whereas before, gosh, I couldn't even think about it at all. So progress has been made. Yeah, the conference was fantastic. I had a really, really great time, met lots of new people, new friends, and caught up with people as well. And I mention all of this because the book I've chosen to talk to you about is called Taking Turns, and it's by my very dear friend MK Czerwiec, who goes by the name of Comic Nurse. I'm just going to grab the book, hopefully it won't upset Jack. Have we got the book here? So MK Czerwiec was a nurse, and she worked on an HIV and AIDS care unit in the city of Chicago during the 1980s, which was really at the height of the AIDS crisis. And the basis of this book is her taking oral histories from many of the people there, so patients on the unit and professionals who worked on the unit as well. The title Taking Turns, in fact, comes from the idea that the professionals and the patients, there wasn't a solid boundary, which is really unusual, and really interesting the way that she explains that. A lot of the patients on the unit were members of the gay community, and a lot of the professionals on the unit were as well, so it really felt like a family of sorts that was kind of brought together by this really tragic and horrific event. Or long-term event, I guess. And I love the book. It's really powerful and emotional. It's sad. You have to be prepared for that when reading it. But I love how MK brings to life the stories of the people that she knew on the unit, and it's also a story of discovering herself as well as an artist, and how she wanted to tell this story of this experience that affected her so much. And MK was the keynote speaker at the Graphic Medicine conference, so that was the thing that tipped me over the edge between deciding whether I was going to stay at home or get myself off to Brighton and go, and I'm so glad that I went. She did a fantastic job of her talk, and I really
can't recommend her book highly enough. I hope that you'll look it up and enjoy reading it. Some exciting things are going on with my own graphic novel as well, and the most exciting one of all is that I'm going on another trip to Poland in about a week's time. I'm going to a literary festival in Sopot, which I'm really looking forward to, and I'm nervous as well. I always find it challenging and exposing to travel in another country where I don't speak the language. I feel like my rudimentary bit of Polish is embarrassing. I'll try and learn a little bit more before I go. I feel very uncomfortable with expecting everybody to speak English to me, even though they're generally very happy to. And I had a wonderful time in Poland last year when I went to Warsaw, and this time I'm going to Gdansk and Sopot, which is on the north coast. So I'm really hoping I'm going to get some time on the beach and in the sunshine, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with you. I think my plan is to share a live stream with patrons while I'm there, and I'll record some bits and pieces of my trip to share on Instagram and hopefully on the podcast as well. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks with that ahead, and then starting seriously into the stock preparation for Yarndale. It's going to be keeping me busy. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Green Bean podcast. I hope you've enjoyed watching and hearing what I've been up to. If you want to keep up with us between now and the next time, the best way is Instagram, where I am Katie Greenbean, and I also have an email newsletter which you can find the link to down below. If you want to support the podcast and help me with the goals I'm working towards, which are a new drawing table and then eventually working towards being able to podcast more regularly by making it a sustainable income, you can do that on Patreon, and I offer various benefits including extra episodes and live streams and discounts in my online shop. Thank you so much for watching. Jack's had enough, so we're going to go outside, maybe we'll have a cup of tea, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye.